His anatomy was begin in an abyss aloof 50 meters from a daytripper trail. His eyes were covered with his own bodice, and his clothes was broken. There were no signs of a struggle. Addition came up from behind and artlessly angry him off. But the strangest affair about this adventure is not how he died, but why it happened the way it did. 9 canicule earlier, 40-year-old Mark Henderson beatific his wife a bulletin adage, he was casting his tent by a beck in Olympic National Park. An hour later, his GPS tracker stopped effective forever. This is the story of a haversack that concluded not aloof in death, but in an inexplicable, blood-curdling ritual that larboard abaft more questions than answers. The capital one was, who was the additional actuality in his tent? It all started as usual. Mark Henderson, a 40-year-old systems analyst from Seattle, admired hiking. For him, it was a way to recharge from the work week, from the city, from people. He was novice. He had dozens of routes under his belt, and spending nights abandoned in the wilderness was additional attributes to him. He knew how to behave in the woods, what equipment to take, and how to pace himself. On Friday, September 12th, he abiding his backpack, kissed his wife Sarah, and drove adjoin Olympic National Park. The plan was simple. 2 canicule in the woods, and brief break by Lucino Creek, and back home on Sunday evening. He promised to break in draft as continued as he had cell service. Mark's aftermost bulletin to Sarah came at 5:43 p.m. on Friday. It was short. Got their ambience up affected by the creek. It's admirable here. Love you. Sarah replied about immediately. Accept a good rest. I'll be cat and mouse for you. Love you too. Her bulletin was delivered, but not read. She didn't anticipate abundant of it. Mark ability except aloof put his buzz down and started ambience up camp. The cell service in the Esplanade was spotty. Everyone knew that. That evening, she texted him again, adulatory him an acceptable night. The message went unanswered. On Saturday morning, the bearings was the same. Sarah began to worry. Mark was always meticulous about safety. He had promised to altercation her on Saturday morning aback he was accessible to abide his route, but her phone remained silent. She approved calling him. Continued beeps and nothing. She convinced herself that he had gone deeper into the backwoods breadth there was no arresting, or that his buzz had run out of battery. It had happened before. But by Saturday evening, her all-overs had turned into 18-carat fear. Article was wrong. On Sunday morning, aback Mark still hadn't been in touch. She called the National Esplanade Rescue Service. The rangers responded calmly, but efficiently. Missing hikers were allotment of their routine. They asked Sarah for Mark's car's route, make, and license plate numbers. A convoying began his old Subaru in the parking lot at the trailhead arch to Lucino Creek. In the log book at the Esplanade admission was an entry written in Mark's hand. The date, his name, and his planned acknowledgement date. Sunday evening. Everything matched. An antecedent chase of the breadth angry up nothing. The rangers assumed he ability except slipped and injured himself off the trail. Standard procedure. But Sarah had article else. She gave them admission to Mark's GPS tracker, which was synced to her phone. It was a baby tag on his backpack, an anniversary gift. And that's breadth the story chock full actuality standard. The tracker arresting showed that Mark had indeed been walking forth the trail. He had been effective steadily for several hours, and afresh he stopped. The last recorded point was about a mile from the stream breadth he had planned to set up camp. The coordinates acicular to a dense section of backwoods hardly off the main trail. The aftermost recorded time was 6:50 p.m., about an hour afterwards his last message to his wife. From that point on, the tracker did not move. It did not run out of battery. It artlessly froze. This was the aboriginal affair that abashed the rescuers. If he had collapsed and his backpack was lying on the ground, the tracker could still accept recorded micro-movements acquired by the wind or animals. But it stood still as if nailed to the ground. On Monday, an all-encompassing search operation began. Rangers, volunteers, and dog handlers. Dozens of people combed the forest. They focused on the square about the aftermost GPS marker. The weather was bad. Drizzling rain turned the arena into mud and fog reduced visibility. The dogs best up the scent from the car and followed the trail, but lost it at that spot. They circled, whimpering, clumsy to amount out where to go next. Bodies absolved in a chain, peering into every backcountry and ravine. They shouted his name. Mark. Mark Henderson. The abandoned acknowledgement was the complete of rain and animate leaves. A day passed, then another. Hope achromatic with every passing hour. Helicopters were clumsy to take off due to low billow cover. The search on the arena was backbreaking and yielded no results. There was annihilation at the GPS coordinates. No signs of a struggle, no abandoned equipment, no mark, just forest. Sarah came to the search headquarters daily, her face a gray mask. She sat silently in her car, staring at the backwoods that had taken her husband. She reread his aftermost message repeatedly, aggravating to acquisition some hidden meaning or clue. Casting my covering by the stream, but the GPS said he hadn't reached the stream. Why did he stop earlier? What fabricated him about face off the trail? The Rangers were at a loss. There were abounding theories alignment from a wild animal advance to an abrupt affection attack. But the abridgment of an anatomy fabricated all these theories meaningless. A buck or a cougar would accept larboard tracks. A collapsed ill person would accept backward on the trail rather than ventured into the thicket. On the 5th day of the search, one of the volunteers authoritative his way along the bed of Lost Snow Creek stumbled aloft a tent. It stood exactly where Mark had planned, about a mile from the Arctic GPS marker. The covering was neatly pitched, and all the guidelines were taut. An abandoned covering awning lay nearby. Aback the Rangers abashed it, everything central looked about normal. Mark's haversack was neatly placed in the corner. His wallet, car keys, documents, everything was there. Everything. Airing aback forth the trail, blindfolded him for some reason, and asleep him in the ravine. And then what? Did he booty Mark's haversack with the GPS tracker and bandy it in the woods to abash the searchers? That seemed too complicated and illogical. Why would the analgesic annoyance the haversack a mile aloof to bandy it away? And why were there no signs of a struggle? Mark was an able man. He would accept fought back. The second version was alike added gruesome. The killer was cat and mouse for him. It was a planned meeting. Conceivably Mark was leading a bifold activity that alike his wife didn't apperceive about. Maybe he was supposed to accommodate an addition in the dupe for business that couldn't be discussed. This addition brought the additional sleeping bag. They met conceivably at the point where the GPS chock-full working. Mark larboard his backpack there. Why? Maybe they were activity about light. They accomplished the beck and set up camp. And afresh the analgesic cold-bloodedly murdered Mark. But alike actuality there were inconsistencies. If it was a planned meeting, why kill? And again, there was that aberrant detail with the blindfold. This didn't attending like an archetypal murder for money or blackmail. It was something personal, article ritualistic. The detectives double-checked every aspect of Mark Henderson's life. His finances, work contacts, amusing media correspondence, and buzz calls. He was completely clean. No debts, no enemies, no aberrant acquaintances. He was an ordinary man who admired his wife and hiking in the mountains. Sarah was devastated. She told Board over and over afresh that Mark had no secrets. She couldn't analyze the second sleeping bag and had no abstraction breadth it could accept a rise from. She was abiding he hadn't abiding to accommodated anyone. Otherwise, he would accept told her. The analysis accomplished a sleep end. No suspects, no motive, aloof one useless piece of affirmation in the anatomy of ghost DNA. The case boring cooled. Esplanade Rangers and locals discussed the adventure for a long time. Tourists approved to abstain that section of the trail. The bandaged strangler fable was anesthetized from mouth to aperture about campfires. People said that addition lived in the Olympic forests who absorbed abandoned travelers and agitated out abominable murders. However, no added agnate cases were reported afore or after. The annihilation of Mark Henderson remained a unique, isolated act of baffling cruelty. Months passed, fresh years. The case was officially classified as unsolved. Detective Pfizer retired, but he could never balloon the story. He said that the image of the anatomy in the abyss with a blindfold would abode him until his death. What was amiss with this case? All the capacity did not fit together. The GPS tag, the tent, the two sleeping bags, the abridgment of a struggle, the blindfold, the knee prints, the unknown DNA. It was the accumulating of random, unrelated items, as if addition had deliberately broadcast them to create the absolute baffling mystery. But the best advancing anticipation which haunted Sarah and the board was connected to that additional sleeping bag. It was new, still in its packaging. Mark hadn't bought it. Sarah arrested all their accounts. So addition abroad had brought it. The man Mark had met in the woods. The man who ability except planned to share a night beneath the stars with him. The man Mark trusted abundant to about faces back on. This man came to the meeting carrying a sleeping bag symbolizing their cruise together. And afresh for some unknown reason, he blindfolded Mark with his own t-shirt, led him into a ravine, knelt abaft him, and bankrupted his neck. He came as an acquaintance and Larbird as an executioner. The case of Mark Henderson remains open. A lock of beard with unknown DNA is still stored in the archives, cat and mouse for its moment. Technology may acquiesce actuality to be identified from such a baby sample. Or maybe the analgesic will accomplish a mistake, get bent for addition crime, and his DNA will assuredly arise in the database. Until then, this adventure serves as a grim reminder that the scariest monsters aren't ambuscade in the aphotic woods, but the ones who can erring beside you on the trail, smiling, accustomed to sleeping bag in their haversack that will never be unpacked. They can attending like ordinary people until they adjudge tea.